In 1909, Ty Cobb had the greatest individual season in baseball history. He led both leagues in batting average, home runs, runs batted in, and stolen bases. He won the Triple Crown and added a stolen base title on top of it, becoming the only player in the history of the sport to win what historians would later call the Quadruple Crown. He was 22 years old, he was the most feared hitter on earth, and he could not win a World Series. The 1909 Detroit Tigers won their third consecutive American League pennant and lost their third consecutive World Series. 3 straight trips to October, 3 straight failures. The first team in baseball history to lose 3 World Series in a row. A distinction so humiliating that it has only been matched once in the century since. Cobb hit .231 in the series. He was outplayed by a 35-year-old shortstop named Honus Wagner. A rookie pitcher nobody had heard of won 3 games on a manager's hunch. And the Tigers' catchers were so bad that Pittsburgh stole 18 bases in 7 games. This is the story of the 1909 Detroit Tigers. The team that proved individual greatness is not enough. And the World Series showdown between the Deadball Era's 2 greatest players that turned into a coronation for one and a humiliation for the other. To understand the 1909 Tigers, you have to understand the dynasty they had built and the frustration that came with it. The Tigers had won their first American League pennant in 1907, behind Cobb, who was 20 years old and already the most dangerous hitter in the league. He won the batting title that year, hitting .350, and drove the Tigers to a pennant by 1.5 games over the Philadelphia Athletics. The team was managed by Huey Jennings, a Hall of Fame shortstop from the 1890s, who had reinvented himself as one of the most colorful managers in baseball. Jennings coached third base and screamed a high-pitched yell that became his signature, a piercing shriek that could be heard throughout the ballpark and that unnerved opposing players who had never encountered anything like it. The 1907 World Series was a disaster. The Chicago Cubs, winners of 116 games during the regular season and one of the greatest teams in baseball history, swept the Tigers 4-0 with 1 tie. The tie came in Game 1, a 12-inning affair that was called on account of darkness with the score 3-3. After that, the Cubs won 4 straight. Cobb hit .200 in the series and managed just 4 hits in 20 total at-bats. The Cubs' pitching staff, anchored by Mordecai Three-Finger Brown, a right-hander who had lost parts of 2 fingers in a farming accident as a child and used the resulting grip to throw a curveball that broke like nothing hitters had ever seen, shut Detroit down so completely that the Tigers scored a total of 6 runs in 5 games. It was an embarrassment. The Tigers came back in 1908 and won the pennant again, this time by half a game over the Cleveland Naps in one of the closest races in American League history. The pennant was decided by a scheduling quirk. The 2 teams won the same number of games, but the Tigers had played and lost 1 fewer, giving them the half-game edge. Cobb hit .324 and won his 2nd consecutive batting title. He was still just 21 years old and already the best hitter in the league by a margin that was growing wider with each season. The World Series was a rematch against the Cubs, and the result was nearly as lopsided as the first time. Chicago won 4-1. The Tigers managed just 15 runs across 5 games. Cobb hit .368, the only bright spot on a team that was overmatched in pitching, defense, and every other aspect of the game that was not named Ty Cobb. The Cubs celebrated their 2nd consecutive championship. The Tigers went home for the 2nd consecutive October with nothing. 2 pennants, 2 October humiliations. The press began asking whether the Tigers were simply a regular season team, a squad built to dominate over 154 games but fundamentally incapable of winning a short series against the best the National League had to offer. The 1909 regular season was Cobb's masterpiece. It was the season that defined him, the season that proved he was not just the best hitter in the American League, but the most complete offensive player the sport had ever produced. At 22 years old, in his 4th full Major League season, he delivered a performance that no player before or since has matched in its combination of hitting prowess, raw power, and blazing speed. He batted .377, the highest average recorded in the American League, to that point by any hitter not named Nap Lajoie. It was his third consecutive batting title, extending a streak of dominance that would eventually reach 9 consecutive titles from 1907 through 1915, a record that has never been approached by any hitter in any era. He hit 9 home runs, all of them inside the park, leading the American League. 9 home runs does not sound like much by modern standards, but in the Deadball era, when the baseball was softer and the outfield fences were 400 feet away, hitting 9 home runs in a season required a combination of raw power and extraordinary speed that almost no player possessed. He drove in 107 runs, leading both leagues. He stole 76 bases, leading both leagues. He scored 116 runs. He collected 216 hits. He led the American League in batting average, home runs, runs batted in, and stolen bases simultaneously, a feat that has never been accomplished before or since. Historians call it the Quadruple Crown. Ty Cobb is the only player in the history of Major League Baseball to win one. He was also, by this point in his career, the most controversial player in the sport. The same fury that made him great on the field made him dangerous off it. In August of 1909, during a crucial series against the Philadelphia Athletics at Shibe Park, Cobb slid hard into third base and spiked Frank Baker, the Athletics' promising young third baseman who would later earn the nickname Home Run Baker for his exploits in the 1911 World Series. The play was violent, even by the rough standards of Deadball Era baseball. Baker's shin was gashed open. Blood soaked through his stocking. The Philadelphia fans erupted in fury. Newspapers across the city received death threats aimed at Cobb. The Athletics players publicly accused him of deliberately trying to injure their teammate. Connie Mack, the Athletics' dignified manager, said nothing publicly but privately expressed his disgust. The incident became a national story, debated in newspapers from New York to Chicago, and it cemented Cobb's reputation as either the fiercest competitor in baseball or the dirtiest player alive, depending on which paper you read. Cobb denied the spiking was intentional. He said Baker had blocked the bag, that any runner with competitive fire would have done the same thing, and that the outrage was manufactured by jealous opponents and sensational newspapers. Whether anyone believed him depended entirely on what they already thought of Ty Cobb. His supporters said he played the game the way it was supposed to be played. His critics said he played like a man who enjoyed hurting people. Both groups had evidence on their side. The controversy followed Cobb to Philadelphia for a second series in late September, with the pennant hanging in the balance. The death threats intensified. Jennings showed Cobb the letters. Cobb played anyway. He played because that was what Ty Cobb did. He played through threats and hostility and hatred the way he played through injuries and pain and the memory of his murdered father. He played because stopping was not in his nature. The Tigers clinched the pennant on September 18th, finishing 3.5 games ahead of Max Athletics. It was their third consecutive American League championship, making them the first team in the history of the junior circuit to win 3 straight pennants. The accomplishment was historic. The question was whether it would matter in October. Behind Cobb, the Tigers lineup featured Sam Crawford, a Hall of Fame outfielder from Wahoo, Nebraska, a town whose name became his permanent nickname. Wahoo Sam was 30 years old and in the prime of a career that would produce 309 triples, the most in baseball history. A record that has stood for over a century and that will almost certainly never be broken because the modern game, with its smaller outfields and emphasis on home runs, simply does not produce the conditions that made triples possible in the Deadball era. Crawford hit .314 with 97 runs batted in during the regular season and led the league in doubles with 35. He provided a steadying, veteran presence in the middle of the order that balanced Cobb's fury with consistency. Cobb and Crawford did not get along. The tension between them had simmered since Cobb's rookie year, fueled by Cobb's enormous ego, Crawford's quiet resentment, and the fundamental incompatibility between a man who demanded every spotlight in the room and a man who believed spotlights should be earned through years of service, not seized through personality. Crawford had been the Tigers' best player before Cobb arrived, and he never forgave the younger man for taking the attention that Crawford felt he had earned. They barely spoke off the field. On the field, they communicated through signals and positioning, the minimum interaction required to function as teammates. They did not eat together. They did not travel together on road trips. They could not stand each other. But their personal animosity was irrelevant to their professional production. Together, they were the most dangerous 1-2 offensive combination in the American League, a pairing that gave opposing pitchers no safe place to put the ball. Pitch around Cobb and Crawford would drive the ball into the gap. Pitch to Cobb, and he would hit it where no fielder standing could reach it. The rest of the lineup was solid, if unspectacular. Donnie Bush played shortstop and led the league in walks with 88, drawing free passes with a patience and a strike zone discipline that made him the ideal table setter at the top of the order. Bush was small, 5'6" and 140 pounds, but he reached base at a rate that kept the lineup turning over and gave Cobb and Crawford opportunities to drive in runs. Jim Delahanty, the younger brother of Hall of Famer Ed Delahanty, played second base and contributed 42 runs batted in. Davy Jones patrolled left field and hit .273. The team scored enough runs to support its pitching staff, but relied heavily on Cobb and Crawford to provide the offensive production that the bottom of the lineup could not generate on its own. The pitching staff was formidable and deep enough to match any rotation in the American League. George Mullin, nicknamed Wabash George after his hometown in Indiana, was the undisputed ace. He went 29-8 with a winning percentage of .784, leading the American League in both wins and winning percentage. Mullin was a workhorse who threw over 300 innings and completed the vast majority of his starts. He had won 20 or more games 5 times in his career and was the kind of pitcher who took the ball every 5th day, regardless of weather, fatigue, or opponent. Ed Willett provided a reliable and consistent second option, going 22-9 with an ERA under 3. Ed Summers, who threw a knuckleball that danced and darted unpredictably toward the plate, won 19 games. The top 3 starting pitchers combined for 70 wins, a staggering total that gave Detroit a starter capable of dominating on any given day. The rest of the lineup was solid, if unspectacular. Donnie Bush played shortstop and led the league in walks with 88, providing an on-base presence at the top of the order. Jim Delahanty played second base and hit .248. Davy Jones patrolled left field. The team scored enough runs to support its pitching staff and relied on Cobb and Crawford to provide the firepower that the rest of the lineup could not. But the Tigers had a weakness, a fatal, obvious, exploitable weakness that every scout in the American League had identified and that every opposing manager had discussed. The weakness was behind the plate. Boss Schmidt caught 81 games for the 1909 Tigers and hit .209. He was a former coal miner from Arkansas who had come to professional baseball late and who played the position with more toughness than skill. His throwing arm was adequate for the regular season but dangerously slow against elite base runners. His release was deliberate. His accuracy was inconsistent. When a fast runner took off for second base, Schmidt's throw arrived like a letter sent through the mail. Eventually, but not urgently. Oscar Stanage served as the backup catcher, playing 77 games, and was not significantly better behind the plate. The Tigers' catching tandem was, by the consensus of the league, the worst in the American League at controlling the running game. They could not throw out base runners with consistency. They could not deter stolen base attempts through reputation or execution. They could not prevent aggressive teams from running at will. During the regular season, this weakness was manageable. Most American League teams did not have the collective speed or the tactical aggression to exploit it over 154 games. The Tigers won 98 games despite their catching because Cobb, Crawford, and the pitching staff overwhelmed opponents before the catching became a decisive factor. You do not need a great catcher when you are scoring 5 runs a game and your pitching staff is giving up 3. The World Series would be different. The Pittsburgh Pirates had speed, they had aggression, and they had a manager who knew exactly where to aim. The 1909 World Series was billed as the clash of the century, and for once, the billing was accurate. 2 of the greatest players in the history of baseball would face each other on the biggest stage in the sport for the first and only time. Honus Wagner was 35 years old, 13 years older than Cobb, and he was still the best player in the National League. He had hit .339 during the regular season, winning his 4th batting title in 5 years and driven in 100 runs from the shortstop position. He was, by nearly universal agreement, the greatest shortstop the game had ever produced. He stood 5 feet 11 and weighed 200 pounds, with a barrel chest, bowed legs, and enormous hands that seemed capable of scooping up ground balls the way a steam shovel scoops gravel. He was not graceful, he was effective. He fielded ground balls with a nonchalance that made difficult plays look routine and impossible plays look merely hard. Wagner was also everything that Cobb was not. He was kind, he was modest, he was beloved by teammates and opponents alike. He did not spike base runners, he did not start fights, he did not berate umpires or alienate the press. He played the game with a quiet joy that made people want to watch him, and a consistent excellence that made it impossible to look away. In an era when baseball players were often crude and violent, Wagner was a gentleman who happened to be devastating with a bat. He had led the Pirates to 110 wins during the regular season, the best record in all of baseball, 5.5 games ahead of the Chicago Cubs, the same Cubs who had beaten Detroit in the previous 2 World Series. The Pirates' pitching staff was deep and talented, led by Howie Kamnitz, who won 25 games, and Vic Willis, a Hall of Famer who won 22. They scored the most runs in the National League and allowed among the fewest. They were, on paper, a more complete team than Detroit. The Pirates had opened Forbes Field on June 30th of that year, a brand new concrete and steel stadium that replaced the wooden Exposition Park where the team had played for decades. Forbes Field was one of the first modern ballparks in America, a gleaming structure that held over 25,000 fans and that represented Pittsburgh's ambition to be a major league city in every sense of the word. The World Series would be the first October games played there, and the city was electric with anticipation. The narrative was irresistible to the press. Cobb was the young challenger, the enfant terrible, the 22-year-old Triple Crown winner who played with a fury that bordered on violence. Wagner was the established master, the elder statesman, the 35-year-old who had been the best player in the National League for more than a decade. They represented different styles, different temperaments, and different generations of baseball. Cobb played with rage that came from a place nobody fully understood. Wagner played with joy that seemed inexhaustible. Cobb terrified opponents. Wagner charmed them. The press treated the series as a coronation for one and a trial for the other. There is a famous legend about the series that has been told for over a century. According to the story, Cobb reached first base in an early game and shouted to Wagner at shortstop, calling him Krauthead, a slur aimed at Wagner's German ancestry, and declaring that he was going to steal second base on the next pitch. Wagner, the story goes, took the throw from the catcher, applied the tag to Cobb's face, and split his lip with the baseball still in his hand. It is a wonderful story. Examination of the play-by-play records does not confirm that it actually happened, but the fact that it was believed for 100 years tells you everything about how the public perceived the two men. Wagner was the gentleman, Cobb was the villain, and in the 1909 World Series, the gentleman won. Pittsburgh manager Fred Clark made a decision before Game 1 that nobody understood. He bypassed his established starters and gave the ball to Babe Adams, a 27-year-old rookie right-hander who had gone 12-3 with a 1.11 earned run average during the regular season. Adams had pitched well, but was not considered an ace. Clark started him on a hunch, a feeling that Adams had the composure and the stuff to handle the pressure of October. It was one of the greatest hunches in World Series history. Adams pitched a 6-hitter in Game 1 at Forbes Field and beat the Tigers 4-1. George Mullin, Detroit's 29-game winner, took the loss. The Tigers responded in Game 2. Bill Donovan pitched a complete game and Detroit hammered the Pirates 7-2, evening the series at 1 game apiece. Cobb had 2 hits. The Tigers' offense, dormant in Game 1, came alive. Game 3 was Honus Wagner's masterpiece. He collected 3 hits, drove in 3 runs, and stole 3 bases as the Pirates won 8-6 in a wild, sloppy game at Bennett Park in Detroit. Wagner ran the bases with a reckless abandon that made the Tigers' catchers look helpless. Boss Schmidt threw to second and third and watched the ball arrive after Wagner was already standing on the bag, dusting off his uniform. George Mullin redeemed himself in Game 4 with one of the greatest pitching performances in World Series history to that point. He threw a complete game shutout, striking out 10 Pirates and allowing just 5 hits. The Tigers won 5-0, and for a brief moment, it felt like Detroit might finally break through. The series was tied 2-2. The best-of-7 format, used for the first time in the World Series, meant Detroit needed to win 2 of 3 remaining games. They could not do it. Game 5 went to Pittsburgh 8-4, with Babe Adams winning his second game of the series. The Pirates scored early and often, and Detroit's pitching could not contain Wagner and the Pittsburgh lineup. Adams was steady, scattering 6 hits over 9 innings, while his teammates provided more than enough support. Game 6 was a survival game for Detroit, and Mullin delivered again. He pitched another complete game, winning 5-4 in a tense contest at Bennett Park that kept the Tigers alive. The series was now 3-3, heading to a winner-take-all Game 7. Everything the Tigers had worked for over 3 consecutive pennant-winning seasons came down to one game. Jennings chose Bill Donovan, who had won Game 2 with a strong complete-game effort, to start the deciding game at Bennett Park. Clark went back to his rookie for the 3rd time, Adams against Donovan, the hunch against the veteran. Everything on the line. From the first pitch, it was clear that Donovan did not have it. He hit the first Pittsburgh batter he faced, David Brain, putting the leadoff man on base for free. He walked the next hitter, he walked another. In the first 2 innings, Donovan issued 6 walks and put runners on base in waves. He could not find the strike zone. His fastball sailed high, his curveball bounced in the dirt. The crowd at Bennett Park, which had arrived expecting a 7th-game battle for the ages, watched in mounting horror as their ace loaded the bases, unloaded the bases, and loaded them again. Jennings pulled Donovan after 3 innings, with the Pirates already leading 2-0. The Tigers' bullpen could not stop the bleeding. Pittsburgh scored 2 more in the 4th, 2 in the 6th, and 2 in the 8th. The Pirates ran wild on the base paths, stealing 7 bases in the game alone, bringing their series total to 18. Boss Schmidt threw to second base and watched the ball arrive after the runners were already safe. It was like watching a man try to stop a flood with a paper towel. Adams, by contrast, was unhittable. He threw his 3rd 6-hitter of the series, scattering singles across 9 innings while keeping the Tigers off the scoreboard entirely. Detroit managed 6 hits and 0 runs. The Tigers' lineup, which had scored 5 or more runs in 3 of the first 6 games, was shut out in the game that mattered most. The final score was 8-0, the most lopsided Game 7 in World Series history to that point. The Pittsburgh Pirates were world champions for the first time in the modern era. Babe Adams, the rookie, was carried off the field on his teammates' shoulders. Honus Wagner, the 35-year-old shortstop, celebrated a championship that validated a career already recognized as one of the greatest in the sport. In the Detroit dugout, Ty Cobb sat and watched. For the 3rd consecutive October, he sat and watched another team celebrate on his field or theirs. The greatest player of his generation, the winner of 3 consecutive batting titles and a Quadruple Crown, had lost the World Series for the 3rd straight year. Adams had won 3 of the 4 Pittsburgh victories. A rookie pitcher, starting 3 games on a manager's hunch, had beaten the 3-time American League champions with a composure and effectiveness that defied his experience. He threw 27 innings in the series with a 1.33 earned run average and 3 complete game victories. It remains one of the most unexpected and dominant World Series pitching performances in baseball history. The kind of story that would be dismissed as fiction if it had not actually happened. Wagner finished the series hitting .333 with 6 runs batted in and 6 stolen bases. He had outplayed Cobb in every measurable category. His average was 100 points higher. He had 3 times as many runs batted in. He had 3 times as many stolen bases. He had played the field with a brilliance that made the Pirates' defense impenetrable up the middle. The question the series was supposed to answer, who was the greatest player in baseball, had been answered decisively. Wagner won, Cobb lost, and the margin was not close. Cobb finished at .231 with 2 runs batted in and 2 stolen bases. The man who had hit .377 during the regular season, who had won the Triple Crown and the Quadruple Crown, who had stolen 76 bases and driven in 107 runs, managed 2 runs batted in and 2 stolen bases in 7 World Series games. The regular season statistics that had made him the most feared hitter in baseball were irrelevant in October, where a different set of skills, composure under pressure, the ability to perform on the biggest stage, and the capacity to elevate when the stakes were highest determined the outcome. The Pirates stole 18 bases across the 7 games, running on Detroit's catchers with a frequency and a success rate that bordered on cruel. Boss Schmidt and Oscar Stanage were helpless. They threw to second base and watched the ball arrive after the runner was already standing on the bag, brushing dirt off his uniform, looking back at home plate as if to say, "Is that the best you have?" The weakness that had been manageable during 154 regular season games, when the margins were wide enough to absorb the occasional stolen base, became fatal in a 7-game series where every base, every run, and every out carried the weight of a season. The Tigers would not return to the World Series for 25 years. It would take until 1934, when a different generation of Tigers led by Hank Greenberg, Charlie Gehringer, and Mickey Cochran, the same Cochran who would later attend Ty Cobb's funeral as one of only 3 former players, reached the Fall Classic. They lost that series to the St. Louis Cardinals' Gas House Gang. They finally won their first championship the following year, in 1935, beating the Chicago Cubs. 26 years. That is how long Detroit waited for a World Series title after the 1909 failure. Ty Cobb himself would never win a World Series ring. He played 24 seasons, 22 with Detroit and 2 with the Philadelphia Athletics at the end of his career. He set 90 records. He won 12 batting titles, 9 of them consecutively. He hit .366 for his career, the highest average in the history of baseball. He stole 897 bases. He stole home 54 times. He received the most votes of any player on the first Hall of Fame ballot in 1936. And he never stood on a field in October and watched his team win the final game. The 1909 season was supposed to be the one. The Quadruple Crown, 29 wins from Mullin, 97 RBI from Crawford, 98 team wins. Everything aligned, and none of it mattered because a manager in Pittsburgh followed a hunch on a rookie named Babe Adams. A shortstop named Honus Wagner played the best 7 games of his life, and 2 catchers in Detroit could not throw a baseball 90 feet in time to matter. Huey Jennings managed the Tigers through 1920, an era that produced 3 pennants and 0 championships. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1945 for his contributions to the game as both a player and a manager. His 3 consecutive pennants with Detroit remain one of the most impressive managerial accomplishments of the Deadball Era. But his legacy is permanently complicated by the 3 consecutive World Series failures, a record of October futility that no manager wants on his resume and that Jennings could never erase. Cobb carried the failure for the rest of his life. He never spoke about the 1909 World Series without bitterness. He never fully accepted that he had been outplayed by Wagner, a man he respected as a player but could never acknowledge as his superior. He pointed to the catching, he pointed to the pitching, he pointed to Donovan's 6 walks in Game 7 and the 18 stolen bases and the decisions Jennings made with the lineup. He pointed everywhere except at himself because Ty Cobb did not accept blame. Ty Cobb did not acknowledge weakness. Ty Cobb did not look in the mirror and see a man who hit .231 in the World Series while the man on the other side hit .333. Cobb went on to play 15 more seasons after 1909. He won 9 more batting titles. He hit .420 in 1911. He stole 96 bases in 1915. He finished with a .366 career average and 4,189 hits. He became the first player elected to the Hall of Fame. He became the most dominant offensive player in the history of baseball. He never reached the World Series again. The 1909 season was his last October. His last chance, the Quadruple Crown, the 76 stolen bases, the .377 average, the 9 inside the park home runs, all of it was supposed to culminate in a championship that would validate 3 years of pennant-winning excellence. Instead, it culminated in an 8-0 loss in Game 7, a rookie pitcher celebrating on the mound at Bennett Park. and Honus Wagner shaking hands with his teammates while the Detroit crowd filed out in silence. The 1909 Detroit Tigers won 98 games and 3 straight pennants and produced the only quadruple crown in baseball history. They had the most feared hitter alive, a 29-game winner on the mound, and the most prolific triples hitter the sport has ever seen batting behind their superstar. They lost the World Series because a manager in Pittsburgh followed a hunch on a rookie nobody expected. A 35-year-old shortstop played the greatest 7 games of his career, and 2 catchers in Detroit could not throw a baseball 90 feet to second base fast enough to stop any of it from happening. 3 pennants, 3 losses. The greatest player of his generation standing in a dugout watching the other team celebrate for the 3rd October in a row. The most dominant individual season in the history of baseball, ending with an 8-0 shutout in a decisive Game 7. That was the story of the 1909 Detroit Tigers, the team that had everything except the ability to win when it mattered most. Like and subscribe for more baseball documentaries. Until next time.